on AMC True Crime.
What would you do if your 4-year-old daughter looked you in the eyes and said, "Daddy, no," before you killed her? Christopher Watts knows. Because on August 13, 2018, in a quiet Colorado suburb, this seemingly devoted father transformed into something unimaginable. A man who would strangle his pregnant wife with his bare hands, then drive his 2 young daughters to an oil field where he would suffocate them one by one. But here's what will shock you most. For 3 days, he looked directly into news cameras and begged for their safe return, all while knowing exactly where their bodies lay hidden. This is the story of how a perfect family became a perfect lie. Before we dive into this story, I need to ask for your help with something important. Subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who care about justice, not just entertainment. Now, let me tell you about everything that happened. Shanann Watts loves her mornings. At 34, she's built what looks like the perfect life in Frederick, Colorado, a sprawling 5-bedroom home, 2 beautiful daughters, and a husband who she calls her amazing supportive hubby on social media. Bella, 4 years old with golden curls, is the chatty one who asks endless questions. 3-year-old Celeste, Cece to everyone who loves her, follows her big sister everywhere with a stuffed animal clutched tight. And then there's Chris, 33 years old, soft-spoken, works as an operator for Anadarko Petroleum. On Facebook, Shanann gushes about him constantly. He rocks and couldn't imagine life without him. But you know what they say about perfect lives on social media? They're usually hiding something. The Watts family filed for bankruptcy in 2015. Despite a combined income of $90,000, they're drowning in $70,000 of debt. Credit cards, medical bills, student loans, the American dream has become a financial nightmare. Still, Shanann pushes forward. She sells health products for a multi-level marketing company called Level, traveling frequently for business trips. She's a fighter. She has to be. Living with lupus, an autoimmune disease, means every day is a battle just to feel normal. But in June 2018, something wonderful happens. Shanann discovers she's pregnant again, 15 weeks along with a boy they plan to name Nico. Watch Chris's face when she shows him the pregnancy test. That's awesome. I guess when you want to, it happens. Did you catch that? When you want to. Not exactly the reaction of an overjoyed father-to-be. Because while Shanann is planning gender reveal parties and posting about their growing family, Chris is making plans of his own. Plans that involve a 30-year-old coworker named Nicole Kessinger. Plans that involve secret text messages, hidden photos, and lies that will soon spiral completely out of control. August 13th arrives, and everything Shanann believes about her perfect marriage is about to shatter in the most horrific way possible. August 13th, 2018, 1:48 a.m. A white SUV pulls into the driveway of 2018-25 Saratoga Trail. Shanann Watts steps out, exhausted from her business trip to Arizona. Her friend Nicole Atkinson helps her with her bags. Shanann's lupus makes these trips particularly draining. The house is dark. Chris and the girls are sleeping. What Shanann doesn't know is that for the past 6 weeks, while she's been away working, her husband has been living a double life. Every day, he's been texting another woman. Every night, he's been planning a future that doesn't include his family. 5 a.m., Shanann confronts Chris with what she's discovered. Credit card alerts showing restaurant charges in Denver while she was away. Meals for 2 when he claimed to be alone. She knows. "I know about her," she tells him, according to Chris's later confession. Chris doesn't deny it. Instead, he does something that shocks Shanann to her core. He tells her he doesn't love her anymore. He wants a divorce. Their marriage is over. Now put yourself in Shanann's position. You're pregnant. You've been fighting for your marriage, and the father of your children just destroyed your world with a few cold sentences. "You're never gonna see the kids again," she tells him. Those 7 words seal her fate. What happens next takes less than 4 minutes, but it changes everything. Chris places both hands around Shanann's throat and squeezes. She doesn't fight back. She doesn't scream. The life leaves her body as their unborn son dies with her, but Chris isn't done. Because 4-year-old Bella, hearing something wrong, appears in the doorway holding her blanket. "What's wrong with Mommy?" she asks. Chris looks at his daughter, this little girl who calls him her hero, and lies. "Mommy is sick. We need to take her to the hospital to make her better." He wraps Shanann's body in a bedsheet and drags her down the stairs. Bella watches her father pull her mother's lifeless form down each step, asking again and again, "What's wrong with Mommy?" Chris loads his family into his work truck, but only one of them is coming home alive. And the clock is already ticking on the biggest missing person search in Colorado history. 12:10 p.m., August 13th. Nicole Atkinson stands on the front porch of the Watts home, her worry growing by the minute. Shanann missed her prenatal appointment that morning, something she would never do. She's not answering texts, not answering calls. Atkinson calls the Frederick Police Department. Officer arrives at 1:40 p.m. for a welfare check. Chris Watts, called home from work, gives permission to search the house. He appears calm, cooperative, the concerned husband, but investigators immediately notice something strange. Shanann's purse is sitting in the kitchen, containing her keys, wallet, and most importantly, her lupus medication. Atkinson knows Shanann would never leave without it. The family dog wanders the house, unharmed but clearly confused. Shanann's car sits in the garage, complete with the girl's car seat still installed. And here's what really catches their attention. The master bedroom bed has been completely stripped of sheets and blankets. By evening, Chris is standing on his front porch, giving interviews to local news stations. Watch his body language closely. "When I came home and then walked in the house, nothing. Vanished. Nothing was here. My kids are my life. Those smiles light up my life. Did you notice? He's not crying. His voice doesn't break. He's describing his missing family like he's reporting a lost package." The next morning, August 14th, the FBI and Colorado Bureau of Investigation join the search. This case has all the hallmarks of something terrible. A pregnant woman and 2 small children vanished without a trace from their own home. Neighbors join search parties. Shanann's parents fly in from North Carolina. The local community rallies around what they believe is a distraught father desperately seeking his family. But investigators are already seeing red flags. Chris's story keeps shifting in small ways. First, he says he left for work at 5:15 a.m., then 5:30. He claims they had an emotional but civil conversation about separation, but shows no emotion himself. August 15th, the breakthrough investigators need. Chris Watts agrees to take a polygraph test. He fails, spectacularly. In fact, his score is one of the lowest possible, meaning the machine detected deception in nearly every answer about his family's disappearance. Confronted with his failed polygraph, Chris finally breaks down and confesses. But his first story is so twisted, so calculated, that it makes investigators realize they're dealing with something far more sinister than they imagined. August 15th, 2018. Chris Watts sits across from investigators in a small interview room. His polygraph results spread on the table between them. The numbers don't lie. He's been deceptive about everything. But what comes next is so calculated, so chilling, that it reveals the true depth of Chris's deception. He asks to speak to his father first. When Ronnie Watts arrives, Chris delivers his first confession, but it's wrapped in the most twisted lie imaginable. "I killed Shanann," he tells his father, "but only because she killed the girls first." Think about that for a moment. He's confessing to murder while simultaneously destroying his dead wife's reputation. Even in confession, he's still manipulating the narrative. Here's the story he tells police. He informed Shanann he wanted a separation. She became enraged and went upstairs. Through a baby monitor, he claims he watched her strangle Bella, then smother Celeste. "I went into a rage," he tells investigators, "and ultimately strangled Shanann to death." The story is detailed, specific, and completely false, For investigators, this confession creates more questions than answers. They've seen Shanann's social media posts, talked to her friends and family. Nothing, absolutely nothing, suggests she was capable of harming her children. But Chris sticks to his story. He leads them to the Anatico petroleum site where he buried Shanann in a shallow grave. The girls, he claims, he also transported there after Shanann killed them. August 16, 11 p.m. The bodies are recovered. Shanann lies in a grave so shallow that her back is barely covered with dirt, but it's the discovery of Bella and Celeste that reveals the true horror of what happened. The girls aren't just at the oil site, they're inside the crude oil tanks. Their small bodies had to be pushed through 8-inch hatches at the top of the tanks. Bella has scratches on her body from being forced through the opening. These children weren't placed gently after death. They were stuffed into tanks like garbage. The medical examiner's findings destroy Chris's story completely. There are no signs that Shanann harmed her daughters, no defensive wounds, no evidence of a struggle between mother and children. But here's what investigators find most disturbing. Security camera footage from a neighbor's house showing Chris loading his truck in the early morning hours of August 13th. Watch his movements. He's not frantic, not hurried. He methodically loads what appears to be bodies into his vehicle, backs into his driveway, and drives away. This isn't the behavior of a man who just discovered his family murdered. This is the behavior of someone executing a plan. Then comes the discovery that changes everything. Chris's phone records reveal an affair with co-worker Nicole Kessinger, an affair that began 6 weeks before the murders, while Shanann was away on business. Suddenly, everything makes sense. The failed marriage story, the separation conversation, the methodical disposal of bodies. Chris wasn't acting in rage, he was eliminating obstacles to his new life. Nicole Kessinger comes forward with a story that exposes just how deep Chris's deception goes, and investigators are about to learn the truth about what really happened in the Watts home that morning. August 15, 2018. The same day Chris Watts confessed to murder. 30-year-old Nicole Kessinger sits in a Colorado police station staring at investigators with a mixture of shock and horror. She'd been watching the news about the missing Watts family when a terrifying realization hit her. The man she'd been dating was married to the missing woman. When I read the news, I found out he was still married and his wife was 15 weeks pregnant, she tells police. Let me take you back 6 weeks to understand how deep this deception goes. Chris had told Nicole he was separated, living in his basement, going through divorce proceedings. He wasn't wearing a wedding ring when they met. He called her whenever he wanted, stayed out late, acted completely single. But here's what investigators discover when they dig into their relationship. Chris wasn't just lying to Nicole about his marriage. He was researching a future with her while planning to eliminate his family. Chris's search history reveals chilling Google searches. How does it feel when someone says I love you? When to say I love you for the first time? He'd been planning romantic getaways to secluded locations in Aspen. Meanwhile, he'd hidden photos of Nicole in a password-protected app on his phone, disguised as a calculator. But here's where Nicole becomes the key to breaking this case wide open. She tells investigators something that destroys Chris's timeline completely. On August 13th, the day of the murders, Chris texted her saying his family had disappeared, but Nicole reveals something crucial. Chris showed almost no emotion about his missing family. He was calm, tried to change the subject, and kept making plans for their future together. It got to a point that he was telling me so many lies that I eventually told him I did not want to speak to him again until his family was found, she tells police. That's when she called the FBI tip line. But investigators still need the truth about what really happened that morning. Chris's story about Shanann killing the girls isn't just false, it's impossible based on the forensic evidence. February 18th, 6 months after his sentencing, Chris Watts finally agrees to tell the complete truth in a 5-hour interview at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. And what he reveals is so much worse than anyone imagined. Every time I think about it, I'm just like, did I know I was going to do that before I got on top of her? Chris tells investigators. It just felt like there was already something in my mind that was implanted, that I was going to do it. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated murder. The real story. After strangling Shanann, Chris loaded her body and both girls, alive, into his truck. At the oil site, Bella and Celeste watched their father remove their mother's body. "What are you doing to Mommy?" they asked. You're about to hear the most heartbreaking details of this case. The final words of two innocent children who trusted their father completely, and how a man could look into his daughter's eyes and become a monster. What I'm about to tell you contains the most disturbing details of this case. Chris Watts, in his own words, describing the final moments of his daughter's lives. At the Anadarko oil site, with Shanann's body lying on the ground, Chris turns to 3-year-old Celeste first. He takes her favorite blue Yankees blanket, the one that made her feel safe, the one she clutched during bedtime stories, and he places it over her head. Then he suffocates his own daughter, Bella. Sitting right next to her sister, watches this happen. She doesn't scream, she doesn't fight. She's 4 years old, and she trusts her daddy completely. Chris carries Celeste's body to an oil tank and drops her through the 8-inch opening. When he returns to the truck, Bella asks him a question that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Is the same thing gonna happen to me as Cece? She understood what was about to happen, and she looked to her father, the person who was supposed to protect her above all others, for mercy. Chris doesn't answer directly. Instead, he takes the same blanket that killed her sister and places it over Bella's head. But Bella fights. This 4-year-old girl fights for her life with everything she has. She claws, she struggles, she tries to remove the blanket. Her final words, according to Chris, "Daddy, no." I hear those 2 words every time I close my eyes, Chris later tells investigators. After murdering Bella, Chris forces her small body through the same 8-inch hatch as her sister. The medical examiner later finds scratches on Bella's body from being pushed through the opening. Then he buries Shanann in a grave so shallow that parts of her body remained exposed. But here's what makes this even more chilling: Chris's behavior afterward. When his co-workers arrive at the oil site that morning, they describe him as acting perfectly normal. While millions of people across the country are watching news coverage of the missing family, Chris is texting Nickel about their weekend plans. He even sends fake texts to Shanann's phone. "Just let me know you are okay. I am worried about you." This isn't the behavior of someone who snapped in a moment of rage. This is calculated, methodical, and utterly without conscience. For 3 days, Chris stands in front of news cameras, pleading for his family's return. "My kids are my life," he says. "Those smiles light up my life." All while knowing exactly where their bodies were hidden. District Attorney Michael Rourke later describes the murders as deliberate and vicious. Imagine the horror in Bella's mind as her father took her last breaths away. The defendant then methodically and calmly loaded their bodies into his work truck, not in a hasty or disorganized way. Justice comes to Christopher Watts, but can any sentence truly account for the magnitude of his crimes? And what happens when a killer has to face the families he destroyed? November 19, 2018, Weld County Courthouse, Colorado. Christopher Watts sits in orange jumpsuit and shackles, his head down, as the families he destroyed prepare to address the court one final time. Frank Ruzicek Sr., Shanann's father, approaches the podium. His voice breaks as he speaks directly to his son-in-law. "I trusted you to take care of them, not kill them. You carried them out like trash. You disgust me. You have to live with this vision every day of your life, and I hope you see that every day of your life." Shanann's brother, Frankie, asks the question that haunts everyone. What kind of person slaughters the people they love the most? But perhaps the most powerful moment comes from Shanann's mother, Sandy Ruzicek. "I didn't want death for you because that's not my right. Your life is between you and God, and I pray He has mercy for you." Even Chris's own parents speak, with his mother tearfully saying, "As your mother, Chris, I have always loved you, and I still do. We forgive you, son." Judge Marcelo Kopkow delivers the sentence. 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 3 consecutive, 2 concurrent, an additional 48 years for unlawful termination of pregnancy. 36 years for tampering with deceased bodies. Chris Watts will die in prison. The judge calls it the most inhumane and vicious crime that I have handled out of the thousands of cases that I have seen. Today, Chris serves his sentence at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, moved there for security reasons. He spends 23 hours a day in his cell, with 1 hour for exercise or showers. In later interviews, he claims he's found God, that he's truly remorseful. But District Attorney Michael Rourke believes we'll never know the real reason why. I don't think he will ever tell us. I don't think he will give an honest assessment of why he did what he did. The Watts family murders shocked the nation because they shattered our most fundamental assumptions about family safety. If a father, the person children should trust above all others, can become their killer, then nowhere is truly safe. This case reminds us that evil doesn't always look like what we expect. It can have a soft voice, a normal job, and a social media presence full of family photos. It can say "I love you" while planning murder. Shanann Watts was 34 years old, 15 weeks pregnant with a son they planned to name Nico. She was a fighter who battled lupus daily and worked tirelessly to provide for her family. Bella Watts was 4 years old. She loved asking questions, reading books, and calling her father her hero. Celeste Cece Watts was 3 years old. She followed her big sister everywhere and slept with her favorite blue Yankees blanket every night. Their murders weren't just crimes. They were the destruction of futures that will never be, birthdays that will never come, graduations that will never happen, grandchildren who will never exist. Christopher Watts didn't just kill his family that August morning. He killed every tomorrow they would have shared. And that may be the most unforgivable crime of all. For more true crime stories that examine the darkness hiding behind ordinary faces, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Justice may be served, but the questions these cases raise about human nature will haunt us forever.